In the ever-evolving landscape of criminal activities, offenders continuously adapt and devise new ways to pursue illicit gains. One such example is the emergence of proliferation financing. As traditional criminal enterprises face increased scrutiny and countermeasures, criminals resort to innovative tactics to exploit vulnerabilities in the global financial system. But what exactly is proliferation financing? And why do criminals use proliferation financing for financial gain? In today's video, we will be taking a look at what is proliferation financing, why do criminals use proliferation financing, and the money laundering techniques used in proliferation financing. Hello, and welcome to another KYC Lookup video, where we bring you AML related content to help you enhance your knowledge in the fight against money laundering. Before diving into today's video, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future videos. Oh, and don't forget to leave us a comment with any suggested topics you would like us to cover in the future. So, on to today's video. What is proliferation financing? Proliferation financing refers to the financial activities and transactions that support the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, WMD, and their delivery systems. It involves the movement and transfer of funds, goods, and services to entities or individuals involved in the movement, acquisition, or proliferation of WMDs. The primary objective of proliferation financing is to provide the necessary financial resources for the proliferation of WMDs, allowing proliferators to acquire materials, equipment, and technology needed or to sustain their activities. Why do criminals use proliferation financing? Proliferation financing serves as a clandestine pathway for criminals to support the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, WMD, and their delivery systems. By delving into the motives behind the utilisation of proliferation financing, we can better understand the complex dynamics that drive criminals to engage in such illicit activities. The key reasons why criminals resort to proliferation financing and the implications for global security are as follows. Financial gain. One of the primary motivations for criminals to engage in proliferation financing is financial gain. The proliferation of WMDs often involves significant sums of money, and criminals view this illicit trade as an opportunity for lucrative profits. They exploit the demands for prohibited goods, services, and technologies, capitalising on the clandestine market and high-value transactions associated with the WMD proliferation. Evading detection and sanctions. Criminals involved in proliferation financing recognise that this form of illicit activity provides a cloak of secrecy and offers a means to evade detection and international sanctions. They exploit vulnerabilities in the global financial system, employing sophisticated money laundering techniques, trade mispricing, and the use of illicit networks to obfuscate the origin and destination of funds. By exploiting weak regulatory regimes and cross-border loopholes, criminals aim to outsmart authorities and continue their illegal activities. Exploitation of dual-use goods and technologies. Dual-use goods, items with both civilian and military applications, are frequently targeted by criminals engaged in proliferation financing. They exploit legitimate trade in these goods, such as chemicals, electronics, or machinery, by acquiring them for their WMD programs under the guise of peaceful purposes. Criminals leverage the ambiguity around dual-use items to avoid suspicion and divert them into illicit channels, furthering their proliferation goals. Nexus with transnational crime and terrorism. Proliferation financing intertwines with transnational organised crime and terrorism, providing criminals with additional incentives to engage in these activities. The convergence of the illicit networks allows for the sharing of resources expertise and logistics, facilitating the movement of funds and materials across borders. Criminal organisations find synergy in the interconnected realms of proliferation financing, transnational crime, and terrorism, exploiting them to expand their influence and power. And geopolitical and strategic agendas. Certain criminals may be motivated by geopolitical and strategic agendas when engaging in proliferation financing. State-sponsored actors or rogue nations seek to advance their own national interests, challenging regional and global power dynamics. By supporting the proliferation of WMDs, they aim to gain leverage, influence, and assert dominance in specific regions or against rival nations. Money laundering techniques used in proliferation financing. Money laundering techniques are employed by criminals engaged in proliferation financing to conceal the illicit origin and movements of funds associated with the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, WMDs, and their delivery systems. These techniques enable them to integrate illicit funds into the legitimate financial system, making it difficult to trace the proceeds and disrupt their illicit activities. Here are some common money laundering techniques used in proliferation financing. Layering. Layering involves conducting a series of complex transactions to create layers of financial transactions, making it challenging to trace the original source of funds. Proliferators move funds between multiple accounts, jurisdictions, and financial institutions, often using shell companies and offshore entities to obscure the paper trail and obfuscate the fund's origin. Trade-based money laundering. Proliferators exploit trade transactions to disguise the movement of funds and hide the true nature of their illicit activities. They manipulate invoices, over or under invoice goods and services, or engage in fraudulent trade documentation to misrepresent the value or nature of the underlying transactions. This technique allows them to legitimise the movement of funds and integrate illicit proceeds into legitimate trade flows. Shell companies and fronts. Proliferators establish shell companies or fronts to give the appearance of legitimate business operations. These entities often have nominal or nominee directors or shareholders, making it challenging to trace their ultimate beneficial owners. Proliferators use these companies to facilitate financial transactions, including the receipt and transfer of funds associated with proliferation financing. Smurfing or structuring. Smurfing involves breaking down large sums of money into smaller, less suspicious amounts to avoid detection. Proliferators conduct multiple smaller transactions, often below reporting thresholds, to make it harder for authorities and financial institutions to identify suspicious activities. This technique allows them to move funds discreetly without arousing suspicion. Cryptocurrencies and virtual assets. Proliferators increasingly exploit cryptocurrencies and virtual assets to launder money associated with proliferation financing. These digital currencies offer greater anonymity and can facilitate cross-border transactions, making it challenging for authorities to trace and monitor the flow of funds. Cryptocurrencies provide proliferators with an additional layer of obfuscation and the ability to convert illicit funds into seemingly legitimate assets. And offshore accounts and jurisdictions. Proliferators leverage offshore accounts and jurisdictions with tax regulations to facilitate money laundering. These jurisdictions often have strict bank secrecy laws and limited cooperation with international authorities, making it easier for proliferators to hide their illicit activities and shield their assets from scrutiny. Countering the use of money laundering techniques in proliferation financing requires enhanced regulatory frameworks, international cooperation, and diligent financial institution practices. Robust anti-money laundering AML measures, including thorough customer diligence, transaction monitoring systems, and suspicious activity reporting, are essential to detect and deter proliferation financing activities. Collaboration between financial institutions, law enforcement agencies, and international organisations is crucial to disrupt the financial network supporting the proliferation of WMDs and safeguard global security. The impact of proliferation financing on society and economy. Proliferation financing, with its links to the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, WMDs, extends far beyond national security concerns. Its impact resonates across society and the economy, posing severe threats to stability, prosperity, and global well-being. Some of the consequences of proliferation financing are the following. National and global security. Proliferation financing undermines national security by enabling the development, acquisition, and deployment of WMDs. The availability of funds empowers proliferators, increasing the risk of catastrophic human casualties, environmental devastation, and regional conflicts. At a global level, proliferation financing disrupts the delicate balance of power, fosters geopolitical tensions, and jeopardizes international peace and stability. Economic implications. The economic implications of proliferation financing are far-reaching. Resources diverted towards the proliferation of WMDs drains funds that could otherwise be invested in crucial socio-economic sectors such as healthcare, education, and infrastructure. This diversion undermines development efforts and stifles economic growth. Moreover, the proliferators of WMDs often leads to increased defence spending, redirecting resources away from productive sectors and hampering overall economic progress. Disruption to international trade. Proliferation financing relies on illicit trade practices, which disrupt legitimate international trade. Techniques like trade-based money laundering and the use of front companies distort markets, undermine fair competition, and damage the reputation of the global trade system. The diversion of dual-use goods and technologies for illicit purposes erodes trust and cooperation, impeding economic development and cooperation between nations. Environmental and humanitarian consequences. The consequences of proliferation financing extend beyond the immediate security and economic realms. The use of WMDs, facilitated by these illicit financial activities, carries grave environmental and humanitarian risk. Nuclear, chemical, or biological weapons can cause immense loss of life, infrastructure destruction, and long-term environmental contamination. The aftermath of such events reverberates for generations, impacting societies, ecosystems, and the well-being of future generations, and undermining non-proliferation efforts. Proliferation financing undermines international non-proliferation efforts and mechanisms. It circumvents existing legal frameworks, sanction regimes, and export control systems designed to prevent the spread of WMDs. By weakening the credibility of non-proliferation agreements, proliferation financing erodes trust and hampers collective efforts to curb the proliferation of WMDs. In conclusion, understanding the motives behind criminals resorting to proliferation financing is crucial for countering this global security threat effectively. Financial gain, erosion of detection and sanctions, exploitation of dual-use goods, links with transnational crime and terrorism, and geopolitical ambitions all contribute to criminals involved in proliferation financing. Combating these activities requires robust international cooperation, strengthening regulatory framework, enhanced intelligence sharing, and increased vigilance from financial institutions and law enforcement agencies. By dismantling proliferation financing networks and disrupting the flow of illicit funds, the international community can mitigate the risk associated with the proliferation of WMDs and safeguard global security. Well, there you have it. What is proliferation financing? Why criminals use proliferation financing? And the money laundering techniques used in proliferation financing. Please tell us in the comments section if you think governments are doing all they can to stop proliferation financing, and any other topics you would like us to cover in the future. We have now launched our very own courses for you to take a more in-depth look at a variety of subjects, such as Introduction to AML, Beneficial Ownership, and Customer Risk Rating, for example. So make sure you visit our website for further details and let us help you connect the dots in KYC. Thank you for watching the video, and if you made it this far, don't forget to like and subscribe to watch more amazing videos.